Hello and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast series proudly brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies in the National University of Singapore. I'm Harpreet Kaur, editor at ISAS, and I will be your host for this episode. We have with us today Dr. Karthik Nachiappan, research fellow at ISAS. Dr. Nachiappan's current research lies in international political economy of technology in India, cybersecurity, social media, and artificial intelligence, and how policies influence India's positions on global rules covering these technology issues. Welcome, Karthik.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to share that we will be hearing Karthik's thoughts and analysis on an interesting current topic, the Quad and ransomware. The Quad members, Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, recently announced their joint efforts to combat cyber attacks with added focus on ransomware. Their aim is to create a safer and concrete cyber world, primarily in the Indo-Pacific. The Quad members are very focused on their vision. Among the 6 pillars, cybersecurity appears to be a hot favorite. We look forward to Karthik shedding light on the subject matter. Karthik, may we start the episode with a very simple question? What is ransomware and what is the motivation behind the Quad's focus on ransomware?
So ransomware is a type of a malicious software that's designed to block access to a computer system until a ransom or a sum of money is paid. So what generally happens is a cyber attacker or a hacker locks and encrypts a victim or an organization's data, critical files, and other sensitive information and demands payment to unlock and decrypt that data.
Right.
By encrypting these files and demanding a ransom payment, what cyber attackers do is they place organizations in a position where paying the ransom is the easiest and cheapest way to regain access to their files. The motivation behind the Quad's focus is that you're actually seeing all the 4 Quad countries, Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, experience a wave of ransomware attacks over the last few years.
Yep.
Allegedly, the source of most of these attacks emanate from China and Russia. Increasingly, most victims and organizations are paying some form of ransom to reclaim power over their files. So what the Quad countries are trying to do is better understand what the challenge is and how and if they can better cooperate amongst themselves to root out such cyber attacks from occurring regularly as they are.
Interesting. My next question, how then do efforts pertaining to cybersecurity fit into the Quad's overall agenda?
Well, we're seeing how and if they fit right now. So in June 2022, the Quad unveiled an expanded agenda where all 4 countries could cooperate on issues that were not directly security and military oriented. So issues like health, climate change, and critical technologies. And cybersecurity falls under the last pillar of critical and emerging technologies.
Right.
So after the meeting, the joint statement on ransomware that the Quad released show that they are keen to target malicious cyber activities from China, Russia, and possibly Iran that target critical infrastructures across the Quad and other countries. The impetus to drive momentum and achieve some sort of convergence appears imminent on issues like cybersecurity and especially ransomware. As I mentioned, given the frequency of attacks.
Yeah.
I think till now, the Quad has had a few meetings and conversations on cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And they're beginning to map out a workable strategy going forward. And as I mentioned, the Quad's interest and focus here is also connected to the alleged sources of such attacks. Nearly 75% of the revenues derived through ransomware attacks went to criminals and groups linked to Russia and China. Chinese cyber operations pose serious national security challenges for all Indo-Pacific countries, including Quad countries. And this factor, alongside other reasons, appears to have given the Quad enough reasons to talk about ransomware.
Fair enough. What kind of cooperation does the recently released statement outline, and how will the Quad members benefit from this? And I'm talking about the cooperation on ransomware here.
So I'll maybe answer that by focusing on what the Quad countries can do and how they can work together on ransomware. And if they do this well, then I think there should be some benefits that will come out of it. First, I think the Quad countries can all benefit from sharing more information and experiences on the type, frequency, and nature of such ransomware attacks. As I mentioned, it's happening in all 4 countries. They're targeting similar institutions, critical infrastructures, financial institutions, banks. So it's important that there is a database that these Quad countries can develop to understand what kinds of attacks are occurring and who are the targets of such attacks. Second, Quad discussions could also strengthen, given these frequent ransomware attacks, they could strengthen domestic cyber capabilities through increased joint cyber training exercises. And I think that there's further scope for all the computer emergency response teams of all 4 countries to work together to deepen their training and deterrence exercises on this issue. Discussing counter ransomware protocols, I think, also helps Quad countries bolster their cyber defenses, not only on ransomware attacks, but also on other kinds of cyber attacks that are occurring. And third, I think Quad discussions can also flag and highlight best practices to track and deter ransomware attacks before they happen through the implementation of baseline security standards. So the greater they share, or they have mutual security standards, especially on issues like 5G, then it helps all these countries root out such attacks before they happen.
All right. Karthik, just to balance out the discussion here then, what are some challenges relating to cooperation among the Quad members on ransomware? I'm sure they're experiencing some.
Yeah. So one big challenge is each Quad member's domestic cybersecurity situation. Cybersecurity is a vast field. It's spread across multiple institutions and areas in most of these countries. So each country's domestic cyber resilience differs. So, and generally it's understood that India lags behind its other counterparts in terms of cyber defense and preparedness. India still doesn't have a cybersecurity strategy. It's probably experiencing the most amount of cyber attacks amongst the Quad countries. And there's a lot that can be done to bolster India's cyber defenses. This in and of itself does not mean that the Quad countries cannot cooperate further on cybersecurity. But I think it could constrain the speed at which the Quad can collectively respond on this issue. Another challenge is that a lot of these attacks are rising much faster and quicker than countries can respond to them. So, for example, in the US over the last couple of years, there have been really high-profile ransomware cases, like the Colonial Pipeline hack and the recent attack on JB Foods. Both of these are in very critical and vital sectors. The Australian Cybersecurity Centre notes a 15% rise in ransomware attacks in Australia over the last couple of years, also targeting very critical institutions and infrastructures like banks and energy infrastructures. Indian entities, as I mentioned, have also been on the receiving end. Again, very vital organization and entities targeting areas like energy and transport. Japan as well has witnessed more ransomware attacks in 2022, with almost 50% targeting small and medium-sized enterprises. So the ransomware challenge is quite big in and of itself, and it attacks different kinds of organizations, sectors, and infrastructures. I think that's going to be a big challenge, just keeping up with these attacks and coming up with a strategy and pooling together the capabilities of all Quad countries to deal with this challenge. So working through the Quad may be necessary and will be necessary, but it may not be sufficient to deal with the ransomware challenge.
Fair enough. That seems like a lot of work to be done. But if I could just zoom into Southeast Asia, my last question, Karthik. In Singapore last year, 790 customers of a local bank lost about Singapore dollars $13.7 million through spoofed SMSs sent out by scammers. Is there something that Singapore could pick up from the Quad collaboration on strategies to counter these attacks and create a safer cyberspace for the common man?
So as I mentioned, ransomware is not a problem that's limited to the Quad. All Indo-Pacific countries are experiencing increased ransomware attacks, including Singapore.
Yep.
Ransomware has become a growing concern for Singapore. In fact, the number of ransomware attacks and cases have gone up substantially from 2020 and 2021 into this year. I think what Singapore has done is promised to establish a task force that can look at how Singapore can respond to this issue. What's going to be important is that there is an adequate international engagement strategy in fighting ransomware. That means working with entities like the Quad and other international partners to better understand this challenge and respond to it, as well as push for greater international cooperation on ransomware at different international organizations. It's also important that Singapore, given it's a major financial center and a fintech center, that there's adequate financial supervision and cross-border law enforcement operations that are taking place should ransomware attacks occur on financial institutions. So that's a particularly critical area for Singapore, the area of finance. I think more fundamentally, Singapore going forward has to push for greater international engagement in dealing with the ransomware challenge and pushing for more international cooperation on all these issues that I mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your views, Karthik. I have surely learned quite a bit during the session. I hope our listeners also found the discussions enriching and productive. Thank you all for tuning into South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, please visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get updates from our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.